And may I ask that the live stream be started? Thank you, Jen, and good morning to everyone. It's 10 o'clock on the 21st of April 2021, and welcome to this licensing subcommittee hearing. Before we formally start the meeting, I will now go to each subcommittee member in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for me to do so under the Local Authorities Police and Crime Panel's Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales Regulations 2020. So if you could verbally confirm that you are able to hear me, and I will in return confirm that I can hear you. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on so that you can be seen by other members in attendance and the public watching. First of all, Councillor Paul Andrews.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning all. Yes, I can hear and see you loudly.
And you. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. And Councillor Polly Andrews.
Good morning, Chairman, and I can hear and see you.
Thank you. People will note that we have two Councillor Andrews in the room today, and both with the initial P. So I will refer to them as Councillor Polly Andrews or Councillor Paul Andrews. And that is no disrespect to any of them. I would also like to request that those who are presenting throughout the meeting can also confirm that they can hear and be heard. First of all, Caroline Marshall, the clerk to the committee.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you.
Thank you, Caroline. Emma Bowl, from the Licensing Authority.
Yes, Chair, I can hear and see you.
Alice McAlpine, our legal advisor today.
Good morning, Chair, I can see and hear you.
And you. And Jen Priest, our technical support.
Good morning, Chair, I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I can hear and see you, Jen. Thank you. I'd like to formally welcome everyone to today's meeting. The Council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making an official recording. The recording forms a part of the public record of the meeting and will be available on the Council's website. Please note that while it's only a legal requirement that you have your audio switched on, it is the Council preference that, where you are able to do so, you also have your video switched on. Please remember what you do and say in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. Can I also remind members to ensure they are wearing their headsets while listening and speaking during the meeting? This will ensure that the audio quality is of the highest possible quality and background noise is significantly reduced. As these are extraordinary circumstances, there are some additional points for members and officers to be aware of. As part of our meeting etiquette and in line with our normal committee practices, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start and during the meeting. I will then run through the agenda in the customary way. When you wish to speak, please use the hand button against your name in the participants list, which should be on the right of your screens. I will then invite you to speak in order of the hands being raised. Please remember to unmute yourself to speak and mute yourself again when you have finished. Please do not raise your physical hand, as I do not wish to miss anyone who may wish to speak. Please note the chat facility has been switched off to ensure that members' contributions can be offered through the spoken voice and for the public record. Please ensure all mobile devices are switched off to prevent interference with the audio and video systems. If any attendee loses connection during the meeting will be paused to ascertain if connection can be restored quickly. If it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of the committee members remains able to hear the proceedings and be heard. If you plan to leave the meeting before the end, please could you indicate this in advance. Where committee members are required to vote on an item, I will ask each committee member in turn to indicate verbally if they are for, against, or abstaining. The result of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes of the meeting where there has been a requirement to record a named vote. If a committee member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to a technical failure, they should not vote on that item. Are there any questions from members on that? No, thank you. Therefore, I will now formally open the meeting. Item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence. We have all members present, so there are no apologies and there are therefore no named substitutes. Declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interest to be declared for items on the agenda today? Please could you do this by raising your virtual hand, and I will then ask you to speak to notify the meeting which item you have an interest in and the nature of that interest. I have a interest in the King's Head Docklow item in that I do drive past it quite regularly because it's on my route to Leominster and the A49 and beyond. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Thank you very much then. So before I move to the first substantive item on the agenda, could I please ask Democratic Services to move the public representations for the Shires application into the waiting room, please, and we will come back to you when we get to that item.
That's done, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jem. So we are here now to, on item 4, the application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of the King's Head Docklow, Leominster HR 60RX under the Licensing Act 2003. This is to consider that application. So the order of speakers will be Emma Bowell, who will speak on behalf of the Licensing Authority, Mr. Nick Sampa, who's the applicant's agent, and do we have the applicant, Mr. English, I believe? No.
He was certainly sent a link by Caroline this morning. He'd been missed off the list, as had Mr. Haslam. Okay, but Mr. Haslam is here, sir, so I don't know what's happened there.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Sampa. We have, so Mr. Haslam, who is representing CAMRA. Is that correct, Mr. Haslam?
Oh, God.
You've turned...
No, sorry. Terrible timing there. Literally, I'm on my mobile phone. And as you asked that question, I had a call come in, but I was able to decline it. So, yes, I'm here. Yeah. Okay.
For information, Mr. Haslam is representing the campaign for Real Ale, I understand.
That's correct. The Herefordshire branch.
Thank you very much for that. So we'll then turn to Emma, who is going to give a presentation on behalf of the Licensing Authority outlining the issues of this application. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair rightly said, the purpose of this application is to consider a grant of a premise licence in respect to the King's Head Docklow, Leominster under the Licensing Act 2003. As the report was published 5 working days before today's meeting, I will just summarise the report for you. There are recommendations, reasons for recommendations and alternative options which are set out in this report. Key considerations is the Licensing Authority received an application for a grant of a premise licence which has received relevant representation and therefore is brought before the subcommittee for determination. The start of the date consultation was the 25th of February 2021 and the 28-day consultation ended on the 24th of March. The application, which can be found at Appendix 1, requests the grant of a premises licence to allow the following licensable activities during the hours shown: live music indoors, recorded music indoors, sale and supply of alcohol on Sunday to Thursday 11 AM until midnight and Friday to Saturday 11 AM until 1 AM. Late night refreshment Sunday to Thursday 11 PM till midnight and Friday to Saturday 11 PM until 1 AM. Late night refreshment is only a licensable activity between the hours of Monday to Sunday, 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. Hence why this has starting point at 2300 hours. Non-standard timings as the terminal hour extended to 0100 on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Valentine's Day, and Sundays before bank holidays. One representation has been received from Environmental Protection and can be found at Appendix 2, and this has been agreed by the applicant. One relevant representation has been received from a member of the public that the Licensing Authority has accepted as being relevant and can be found at Appendix 3. Under the licensing policy of 2020 to 2025, a section of 6.6 states a rep is relevant if it relates to the likely effect of the grant of the license on the promotion of at least one of the licensing objectives, hence why the representation was accepted. In respect of the public representation, the applicant and the applicant's agents have sent responses and can be found at Appendix 4. 80 letters of support were received following a social media campaign by the applicant at the end of the consultation period. So these have been rejected by the authority as being received out of time, but will be kept on file. So all the rest of the matters that are listed in the report are set out in this report, and that includes the right of appeal. Appendices 1 to 4 can be found at the back of this report, and there were no background papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. Could you just highlight the change in licensing policy again, please, because I suspect people may well be slightly confused as to why we're taking into account the likely effects rather than the having to rely on substantive evidence?
Yes, of course, Chair. So a section of 6.6 of our Herefordshire Council licensing policy of 2020 to 2025 in connection with the 182 guidance under the Licensing Act is a rep is relevant if it relates to the likely effect of the grant of the license on the promotion of at least one of the licensing objectives, hence why the Licensing Authority accepted the public representation on the basis of prevention of public nuisance.
Thanks, Emma. So members, we have the issue then of defining what likely effect actually means. I'll leave that with you for now. Mr. Semper, I believe you are next. You're muted, Mr. Semper.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, fantastic. Can you sort me out? Yeah, I'm sorted. Okay, right. Good morning, everybody. The King's Head in Docklow has been a pub for literally hundreds of years. It is an archetypal village pub. Coming from Bromyard, Chair, you've already told us you know its location. However, in the past decade, it has fallen to the same blight that has destroyed countless others across the county. Indeed, since the smoking ban, the UK has lost 11,000 pubs and seemingly COVID has claimed a further 8,000. I do not intend to steal any of the thunder of Mr. Haslam's presentation, which you will shortly receive, save but to say that there was a concerted effort to turn this pub into dwellings. The local community massed and rallied around camera, and it was saved, but left empty for several years with no immediate hopes of salvation. A few months ago, Mr. Paul English discovered this abandoned pub and made it his business to restore this lost jewel to North Herefordshire. He relocated himself and his family here to the village, so confident was he that he could make it work again. So let me notionally introduce Paul to you and explain his self-confidence. He grew up in the trade. He is in fact a second generation licensee. He knows his trade craft, having been a general manager of a chain of pubs in the southeast of England. He's been a business owner for over 35 years and has run public houses in several different locations during that time, always being family pubs. Paul has been married to Deborah for 42 years and he's father of 5 adult children and grandfather of 8. He is a pillar of his former community down there in Royal Tunbridge Wells and has also served on the magistrates' bench. Paul's ethos is to provide a good, family-run local pub for local people. He is a strong believer in upholding the law, both licensing and criminal, as is proved by his 15-year service as a Justice of the Peace. He will simply not tolerate drunkenness or bad behaviour, in his public house or its environs. Now, in fairness, we weren't expecting this application to be resisted. Such is the warmth of his welcome from the village of Docklow. You've heard of the 80 letters of support that the licensing authority has received. It was important to commence trading the moment that lockdown entered step 2 restrictions, and to that end, we gave 2 temporary event notices to get the pub open last week, maybe 10 days ago. On the very first day, Paul's Kitchen served over 60 covers, and by the end of the evening, they had around 60 persons on site, all socially distanced in the garden. I understand that the atmosphere was fantastic, and there were no adverse effects upon the village, with everyone having a fantastic time. Indeed, you may have noticed they even featured in an extended piece on the Hereford Times website this week. The last 8 customers left the premises at about 11:45 p.m. It is estimated the average age of the customers that day was between 55 and 60. There was no loud noise to disturb sleeping farm workers or children. No one was staggering along the A44 or vomiting, all down the road. There were no complaints and no police attendances. All in all, it was a very successful day and a lovely atmosphere. And furthermore, things have continued in the same vein ever since. Now, most significantly, there are no representations before you from any of the responsible authorities, each of whom are content that the operating schedule in this application and the concomitant conditions are capable of promoting the licensing objectives. That, in our submission, is highly indicative. You will see before you but one anonymous representation. In it, the representative speculates about people being unable to sleep, rowdy late nights, alcohol-fueled ASB, traffic chaos and pedestrian road casualties, drink driving, broken glass and vomit in the playground, noise, litter and vandalism. There is simply no evidence of any of this. It is mere fear and speculation. The stated case of Thwaites is clear on this point, at para 46 in her judgment, in the judgment of Her Honour Justice Black, whereby she quashed the earlier decisions of the magistrate, saying, and I quote, "It is fair to conclude in the circumstances that they, the magistrates, proceeded on the basis that there was no reliable evidence of actual problems linked to the premises either under the old licence or under the new revised licence." Those are her words, not mine. And may I remind you, there is simply no evidence, reliable or otherwise. Now, this is an evidence-based process, and the only evidence I can see is that it was that of 2 weeks trading with not even a shadow of the predicted problems materialising. I say again, none of the responsible authorities are concerned in any way. Knowing Paul's personal and professional position regarding such behaviours, we have no evidence or even a suggestion that any of these doom-laden prophecies will ever come to pass. Now, the representative states they want usual pub opening hours. Well, since the licensing was deregulated through the Licensing Act 2003, I'm not even sure what usual pub opening hours are anymore. The idea was about spaced finishing times, reducing potential crowding of streets. But this is clearly not of any particular relevant consideration in the King's Head location. But if the representative wants the premises to operate under the hours that were in place prior to its closing, then I have this to say. The previous business failed under those hours, and we would be extremely unwise to repeat what has already been proved a failure in the past. In any event, the hours sought are not unreasonable, and personally, I would urge you, Chair, and your panel to trust Paul, a professional and highly experienced licensee, with those applied for. What lies before you is an operating schedule with conditions that will effectively promote the licensing objectives, and zero evidence suggests that the objectives will be undermined. Consequently, I urge you to grant this modest application and allow the King's Head to flourish again. If we cannot assist the committee any further, Chair, I'll hand over to Mr. Haslam from camera, who can tell you about the realities of saving a country pub and operating it effectively as an asset to the community thereafter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. Are there any questions for Mr. Semper from members of the committee at this stage? No. Okay, Mr. Haslam, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, lovely. Okay. Thank you very much for the subcommittee affording me the opportunity to speak. It's quite exceptional. In fact, Herefordshire CAMRA have never addressed this committee before in a formal representation. But we feel compelled to have done this because of the views of the local community. Nick has already pointed out, Mr. Semper has already pointed out there were 80 letters, but prior to that, CAMRA got involved after the pub closed in 2015. And then, as I'm sure members are aware, in 2018, there was a planning application to convert the pub into housing and build some other houses on the pub's land. CAMRA worked with the local community to resist this, and there were over 110 letters, some of them very passionate, of why people relied on their pub in what is a very remote, relatively remote and vulnerable community. Before the subcommittee is a complaint that CAMRA believes ultimately could undermine the ability for the new operator to run the pub to its full business potential. One only needs to read some of the letters written by the locals to realise the importance of the King's Head to the local community. Docklow is a very small community that has no other facilities, not even a village hall. Historically, any functions such as private parties, community meetings, wakes and wedding receptions were regularly hosted by the pub. This was a win-win. These were both important community events and contributed to the business at the pub. Should the premises licence be restricted, as has been suggested by the complainant, these activities will become more difficult to run by the owners. If they're looking to do extensions for these events, which doesn't seem to be unreasonable, even if a TENS notice is applied, it is understood that it's only limited to 15 occasions a year, much fewer if the event goes beyond the time of midnight, owing to it being 2 separate days. We share the view that there's a lack of evidence provided, and much of what's been said in the statement seems to be driven by fear, in our opinion, an irrational fear, because one only has to look at other rural pubs in Herefordshire and to see that these issues do not manifest themselves. I'm sure the subcommittee members have driven through hundreds of villages late at night and not seen people rolling in the gutter, loud noise coming from events. It just isn't the market. As Nick has stated, the market thereafter as a venue is for a more mature clientele. To suggest that party goers are going to head to this event as if it's some rave, in our opinion, is verging on the absurd. Looking specifically at some of the points made, on the matter of crime and disorder objective, a claim is made that later hours will automatically translate into a higher alcohol consumption, and with it naturally coming public disorder. This is pure conjecture, and it is not based on evidence from what happens at pubs elsewhere. On public safety issues are raised as the regards the absence of pavement and street lighting in the vicinity of the pub. However, the number of people that would walk to the pub is fairly small, and the majority of people going to the pub are going to be driving to and from. That's the nature of the pub's business. Further, and rather strangely, it's made that the late night opening is not appropriate in a rural setting. Again, I asked members of the committee to relate this to other pubs, but look at the disposition of the King's Head. I mean, it doesn't have any immediate neighbours, notwithstanding the fact that the licensee has suggested that the only noise would come, when doors are opening if there were events inside, and that the flexibility of these hours is not going to be required all of the time, this really isn't a significant issue in our opinion. And finally, the comment of broken glass and vomit is somewhat rhetorical. It's just dramatizing a situation, and I believe is a slur on the reputation of the new owners, who, as Nick has pointed out, have an exceptional reputation both in the business as second generation licensees, and that their good character for running a family pub is not in question. Moreover, the King's Head does not have a history of a pub that has caused complaint in its previous operations. However, what the King's Head does do is have a recent history of problematic trading. Further, the new owners are going to have to work very hard to build their business based on the fact the pub has been closed for over 5 years. They're going to have to start from base zero, and they're going to need every bit of trade that they're going to get. They're going to need the passing trade. The villagers on their own, the local community aren't going to be enough to support it on its own. It's going to need to attract other people. And to attract other people, it needs the flexibility to operate and to give them the scope to develop their business. They need to develop that trade, as I've said, based on a destination venue. Granting this license as it is proposed will give them that flexibility to do that, and will provide once more an important community facility to the settlement of Docklow and the surrounding areas. For these reasons, CAMRA asks you to please support this application. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Haslam. Are there any questions from committee members for Mr. Haslam? No. All right. We will now adjourn to consider our decision. Could I ask that the live stream be stopped, and we will return here in, I will say, at 11. Thank you, everybody, for your patience, and welcome back to this licensing subcommittee hearing. We have come to a decision on this application. Before I carry on, can I just check that the two members in attendance can hear and be heard? Councillor Paul Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can hear and see you clearly.
And Councillor Polly Andrews.
Yes, Chairman, I can see and hear you clearly.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So the decision of the committee is such. We have heard representations from the licensing authority, Mr. Semper, the applicant's agent, and Mr. Haslam from the Campaign for Real Ale. We have read and taken into great account the letter of objection received from a member of the public. The points the committee would like to make on that is that Herefordshire tends to be an early to rise, early to bed community. So some of the objectors' points are, in our view, unlikely to occur at the King's Head. And so taking all those factors into consideration, we grant the application as presented. I wish Mr. English the very best of luck with his new venture. Thank you, everybody. 2 minutes and we'll carry on with the, well, no, 1 minute, and we'll carry on with the next application. If the representations could be allowed in from the waiting room. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Councillor Selden, the all members are in with you now.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Could I just go through? I have a list of members of staff and public representations. Could I check that they can hear and be heard, please? First of all, from our environmental protection team, Mr. Chung Se.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you clearly. Thank you.
And are you? Thank you. Elizabeth Laughland.
This morning, Chair. I can see and hear you clearly. Thank you.
And good morning to you too. I can see and hear you too. And public representations are from Mr. Chris Hardman. Or Chris Hardman.
Good morning. Yes, I can see and hear you clearly.
Good morning, Mr. Hardman. Dr. Smith, Clerk to the Boddenham Parish Council. You're muted, Mr. Smith. Dr. Smith, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear you.
And you, Dr. Smith. Thank you very much. Councillor Sharon Collin.
She's not with us at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. David Austin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we can hear and see you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin, and I can hear and see you. Anne Hartfield, do we have Ms. Hartfield?
No, Chair.
No, okay. And lastly, Daphne Ellis.
Again, she's not with us, Chair.
Okay, so we have representation from Boddenham Parish Council and Mr. Hardman and Mr. Austin. Okay. This is item 5 on our agendas. This is an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Shires Park, Ullingswick, Herefordshire, postcode HR13JE, under the Licensing Act 2003. Emma will be making a presentation on behalf of the licensing authority, and then we'll turn to the environmental protection team, and then we'll turn to the public representations. Then we'll turn to Mr. Semper. Yeah. Mr. Semper, you have a question?
Is it not me that goes first, sir?
Not
introducing the application, and then the people speak against, and then we have conclusions at the end.
I'm looking at my legal representatives here. In planning terms, it's usually the objectors that speak first, followed by the applicant, who can then address. The reason being, then it can be addressed by the applicant.
At the end. Yes, so you can address
So,
all the points
Mr.
raised by
Semper,
the object.
Yeah, in usual terms, Mr. Semper, it would be your turn to speak last, so that you can answer any issues that the objectors may wish to raise. Okay, thank you. We'll proceed then with Emma on behalf of the licensing authority. Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair rightly said, this is to consider an application for a grant of a premise licence in respect of Shires Park in Ullingswick. The recommendations, reasons for recommendations and alternative options are laid out in this report. The application for a grant of a premises licence has received relevant representation and is therefore brought before the subcommittee for determination. The application can be found at Appendix 1, requests the grant of a premise licence to allow the following licensable activities: live music, indoors and outdoors, recorded music, indoors, Sunday to Thursday, 11 AM until 2300, and Friday to Saturday, 11 AM until 2400. Late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Friday to Saturday, 2300 until 0100. Sale and supply of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises, Sunday to Thursday, 9 AM until 2300, and Friday and Saturday, 0900 until 0100. Non-standard timings are 11 AM until midnight, Valentine's Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, bank holidays, and Sundays preceding bank holidays. The proposed designated premise supervisor, Diane Elizabeth Thomas, has not been granted a personal licence by her local authority at the time of this report being produced. Now, it's the authority's understanding that live music has been withdrawn for use for outside, but environmental protection and the applicant's agent can confirm that later on. One representation has been received from Environmental Protection and can be found at Appendix 2, and they have objected outright to the application. 20 relevant representations have been received from members of the public in line with the licensing objective prevention of public nuisance that the licensing authority has accepted as being relevant. That can be found at Appendix 3. Section of the Herefordshire Licensing Policy of 2020 to 2025, item 6.6, states a rep is relevant if it relates the likely effect of the grant of a license on promotion of at least one of those licensing objectives, and that is taken from the section 182 guidance also. All matters, including the right of appeal, are set out in this report, which all members and parties here have been privy to. Appendices 1 to 3 can be found at the back of this report, and there are no background papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. And I'll turn to our environmental team. Who's going first? Elizabeth or Mr. Sue?
Myself, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you. So, Environmental Protection Service was consulted on the application for a premises license in pursuant of the licensing objective as laid out in the Licensing Act 2003, namely prevention of public nuisance, in March 2021. Now, the premises in question is the Shires Park. A description of the business was outlined in the application, and I quote, "The Shires Park is a new start-up in Herefordshire, catering to caravanners and campers alike. In light of recent national developments, the applicants would now like to operate a small store on site and provide on sales with light entertainment to their clientele and their guests, primarily from inside their proposed bar area." Now, from the drawings within the original application, the applicant had outlined the licensable activity area as well as the consumption area, which encompass an outside area of approximately 2 acres of field, with an inside area that indicates seating for roughly around 26 people. A shower and a toilet block were also detailed in the plan outside of the licensable area. The operating hours for Sunday to Thursday between 11 a.m. till 11 p.m., with Friday and Saturday between 11 a.m. till 12 midnight. The proposed regulated entertainment include the playing of live music from both indoor and outdoor area, while the playing of recorded music would remain indoor. If I may ask the members of the committee refer to the supplement C information that's submitted by Environmental Protection. It is an aerial map of the site location. So the premises is situated in a rural location in between Ornswick and Mount Bryan. Several domestic properties situated in close proximity to the proposed site, with some properties being as close as some 70 meters away and as far as 210 meters away. The red outlined area is the proposed licensable activity area, while the yellow circle represent individual residential property in close proximity. Now, the description of the business activity to be concluded on the premises and consideration of the premises location are lacking in detail. Catering for caravanners and campers alike were mentioned in the application. However, it is unclear whether local camping is a facility that is available on this site or other sites. The licensable activities area as outlined in the original application encompasses what appears to be a large open field area where the live music entertainment can take place every Friday and Saturday up to 12 a.m. and every other evening up to 11 p.m. It was unclear from the information provided where the entertainment would be located, as well as the layout of the area. However, the Environmental Protection team acknowledged that prior to the subcommittee hearing, the applicant had proposed to remove all outdoor live music and has subsequently amended the licensable activity area to a small area. Although no details of the property structure and sound attenuation property of this building have been provided in the application, or further detail of proposed music entertainment to be provided. The committee may also note that this proposed licensed premises is situated in a rural location, as is detailed in the application. Though the applicant doesn't appear to have recognized this rural location, is likely to have a low general background noise level, especially in the evenings, and little reference has been made in the application to the number of close neighboring residential properties in the area. Both of these make this a noise-sensitive area, especially in the late evening, throughout the week and weekends. The application's lack of consideration on these elements raise concerns that the applicant's proposed condition may not suitably address or demonstrate the appropriate steps having considered by the applicants to promote the relevant licensing objective, that is the prevention of public nuisance. Due to the lack of information and consideration of the licensing objective, environmental protection did not have sufficient information to suitably assess if the applicant's proposed steps were appropriate in promoting the licensing objective, that is the prevention of public nuisance in the local area. The applicant and the agent were notified of these concerns within the permitted consultation period and our representation made to the committee. In the run-up to this licensing committee hearing, environmental protection team have had communication and made numerous requests to the applicants and their agent for additional information in line with the information set out in the Herefordshire Council's licensing policy 2020 to 2025. Changes to the entertainment area have been offered, and proposal for music entertainment be held indoor only have been forthcoming in the last few days. However, there is still a lack of clarity on the licensable activity and structure of the premises. There is also no indication of the likely numbers to attend the site or event, or the frequency of event, or will the public be visiting for the event or staying on site. So in conclusion, the environmental protection team are of the opinions that the original application submitted, along with the additional information provided, still does not include sufficient information to enable the environmental protection team to determine the extent to which the applicant's proposed steps were appropriate in promoting the licensing objective, that is the prevention of public nuisance in the local area. Furthermore, without this information and clarification from the applicant, we still have concerns that a public nuisance is likely to occur due to the noise-sensitive nature of the area, and hence would recommend the committee to consider the refusal of this application on the ground that the current proposed licensing conditions do not sufficiently address the licensing objective. If the committee are minded to grant this license as it stands, we do have a set of proposed conditions for the committee. However, please bear in mind the proposed conditions might not be appropriate or sufficient in promoting the licensing objective without having sufficient information for such assessment. And that concludes my representation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, Chair, that's all that was needed to be said from environmental protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'd like to turn next to representations from Bodenham Parish Council, if I may. I'm not quite sure, Dr. Smith, if it's just you or if the other councillor is present. You're muted, Dr. Smith.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I did not mute myself. Having unmuted last time.
We do automatically, and we allow you to unmute when you are coming to speak. So, Dr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can read out Bodenham Parish Council's representation if you would like me to, if that's helpful.
That would be helpful. Yes, please.
Okay. Bodenham Parish Council has a number of concerns regarding this application. We've been made aware of 2 public notices published last week pertaining to this application, each dated differently. One for the application of a grant of promises license for Diane Elizabeth Thomas of Shires Park, and the other also an application of a grant of promises license in the name of Claire Thomas of Shires Park. Both were published in the Oldham Times, and we attached a photocopy of those notices. To say that we are confused is an understatement, but more concerning is that we have no knowledge of a Claire Thomas, and her name does not appear on any application or documentation. Secondly, we believe Miss Diane Thomas does not hold a personal liquor license, nor has necessary training or accreditation to hold such a license. We therefore question at this time whether a premises license can be considered. Thirdly, Ms. Diane Thomas has not applied for permission to use or convert Shires Park to a venue for glamping, camping or caravanning. If her intention is to run the operation under the auspices of the Caravan or Club organisation, thereby circumventing the need for planning approval, then she will be allowed only 5 occupied sites at any one time. In this event, we would question the need for, for a liquor or music licence at all, let alone a licence offering indoor and outdoor music and alcohol from 9 o'clock until 2300 hours and later at the weekend. Of some relevance is that Miss Thomas has a commercial background in events management. The previous marquee and event company in which she was a partner was dissolved only a week or so ago. We are therefore concerned that this application, if granted, could lead to the development of an event facility on this site, leading to significant noise pollution, additional traffic concerns, etc. Also, food and drink supplies are readily available at existing outlets nearby. We are also aware that an existing barn at Shires Park has recently been altered to provide toilets, washing and shower facilities. This suggests to us that the site is being prepared for more than a touring caravan operation. Finally, we have particular concerns regarding traffic management, and whilst we realise that this does not have specific relevance to this licensing application, any increase in traffic at this location must have an impact on the application and your subsequent decision. Access to an exit from this site is via a difficult bend immediately off the A417, a dangerous and fast stretch of road. Cars towing caravans present particular problems, and should this site be developed in the future as an events facility, this would significantly exacerbate the problem. We are sure the Highways Authority and Hereford Local Authority would endorse this view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I'm going to ask our legal representative, Alice McAlpine, to just comment on the licence requirements for a caravan site. Alice, if you could, please.
So, Chair, I'm not overly averse with caravan licensing requirements. I can tell you at the moment the site does not hold a caravan license. But again, appreciating the subcommittee's probable frustration, the matters in front of you are whether this application would uphold the licensing objectives only and not whether the site is authorised for its use.
Thank you. So as I understand the regulations and the licensing requirements at the moment, if the site is licensed as a caravan club or camping and caravan club certified location, or whatever the other of a unit, they can legally accommodate 5 units or less. Any above that will require planning permission and a caravan license, as I understand regulations as they stand. I'll now turn to Mr. Hardman, if I may.
Yes, thank you. So I don't have a huge amount more to add than the folks previous to me have spoken about already. We're relatively new to the area. We're a neighbouring property. There's a lot of open space in between us and the proposed site. The chance of noise carrying and disruption being there is significant in my opinion. We moved to this area, as I'm sure a lot of people did, for the rural nature of it and the peace and quiet. To have some a space utilised as, I think in one of the representations calls out more of a holiday park type affair rather than the rurality of this area would be a little bit upsetting, I believe. Appreciating that the licensing application has changed and they are taking down the live music element outside, I think there's a number of issues that still need to be addressed as per the last 2 people who have already spoken. And I think to grant this at the moment seems a little bit premature without those questions being answered. I would certainly not, I just worry that granting this at this moment in time without some of those being answered could lead to more significant problems and issues. That's about it, really.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardman. I'll turn now to Mr. Austin, if you please.
Hello. Hello. Well, I have nothing really much to add because the Environmental Protection Officer and Councillor Smith covered the points that most worried me. And in a neighbouring property and just knowing how much sound travels in this rural area, the outdoor live music was of concern, with some fear that it might develop into some kind of party venue or mini festival venue. There does seem to be some lack of clarity as what shape this business will actually be and what their intended clientele is. I am reassured that the outdoor live music has now been curtailed, but I think a clearer idea of what the plans are for the business there would be reassuring. But other than that, I've nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin. Are there any questions from members to either the Licensing Authority, Environmental Protection Team, or members of the public?
Hang on, Alan.
Paul Andrews?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question when it regards live music. Am I still incorrect that they want to play or emit recorded music outside, or is that totally different? Can anybody answer that?
Emma?
Well, I can answer it quite easily. No, there'll be no recorded music outdoors.
That's fine.
Thank
you. That's answered the question.
Semper.
Thank you.
Councillor Polly Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, like a lot of other, this is where licensing and planning overlap, is it not? But we have, from something the Environmental Health Officer said, we've got no idea, have we, how many caravans are likely to even access this site, have we? Or to use the site, as far as I could understand it.
Is that the case?
That is correct, member. That is correct. Yeah.
I thought so. So, I mean, if you wanted to put all these facilities in, this would assume that you're expecting a considerable number of caravans, I would assume. Thank you. That's it.
Could I just say, sorry, Chair. It isn't just about caravans, it's about what any of the activities are. It's a very open application, and it doesn't mention that it will be just caravans. It could be like, say, festivals or anything. You know, as it's currently detailed, we have very little information to judge this application.
Yes, and to add to that,
hang on, Mr. Semper. I suspect that Mr. Semper will be able to shed some light on the objections that are coming forward. And I'll ask Mr. Semper to perhaps add some clarity. Mr. Semper. You're muted, Mr. Semper.
So many buttons, such little time. Here we go. Right, members of the panel, the application lies before you. I'm sure it's not overly complicated, but if you allow me, I'll explain it to you. Diane Elizabeth Thomas owns and lives at the Shires in Arlington. She's a very responsible person, being the deputy manager of Ludlow Racecourse. Unfortunately, Ludlow Racecourse has got a race day on today, and pressure of work prevents her from being here today. But we've taken extensive instructions and are confident we can speak for her in answering any of your queries. Now, part 5 of the application explains that the Shires Park is a new startup, and eventually the applicant intends to cater to caravanners and campers alike. Now, in the light of recent national developments, and I mean the fact that not many of us are going to be able to get abroad to holiday this year, she would like to operate a small store on site and also provide on sales with light entertainment for the prospective clientele and their guests, primarily inside their proposed bar area. Now, there is indeed a substantially built yet modestly sized building that they intend to use as a bar and recreation area for the use of guests. If you look at the application, part 18 further explains that the application for a premises license is to allow for both the on sale and off sales to persons using the bar areas for recreation and leisure. Both these activities will take place within the grounds of the business premises, i.e. within that bar, that clubhouse. We believe that this will allow the business to grow and provide a service to the wider customer base which they seek to attract going forward. Now, all well and good. We also apply for recorded music indoors and live music, both indoors and outdoors, from Sunday to Thursday, as you've heard, and the weekend for the extra hour. Now, there has been some discussion today about whether Mrs. Thomas has planning permission for this kind of developments. This is a licensing committee, not a planning committee, as Councillor Polly Andrews correctly identified, and the statutory guidance tells us at para 14.64 that both schemes, i.e. planning and licensing, must be kept apart to avoid confusion, inefficiency and duplication. That's the words of the statutory guidance, not me. Okay. However, since it has been raised, I can tell you the following. The alternative to applying for planning permission is what's called permitted development. Now, there is or was capacity to operate a site for tenants, for example, under what's called the 28-day rule, okay, tenants camping rights. Right? But as of January 2021, when the pandemic hit us, that's now been extended to 56 days. So in England, 28-day campsites can now open for 56 days in a calendar year under permitted development rights. And those permitted development rights are now extended until the end of December 2021, when hopefully we'll get back to some form of normality. Now, I'm sure you believe me, but if you look at the town and country planning, open bracket, general permitted development, close bracket, England, close brackets, order 2015 schedule 2, that will explain all that, with the additional 28 days added in 2021 as an addendum. Now, many tented campsites operate under the 28-day rule, now 56, being a form of permitted development, allowing land to be used without planning permission for any purpose, for not more than 28, now 56 days in total in any calendar year, and the provision of land of any movable structures for the purposes of the permitted use. Now, this suits the typical This suits your typical summer campsite perfectly, allowing not only tented camp, but also portable buildings such as your ablutions block, which is a good old military expression, and your reception area. Thus, you only need to apply for planning permission if your ambitions go beyond a 28-day, now 56-day camping site, and you're not in a position to apply for a lawful development certificate for pre-existing activities, then you will need to apply to the local authority for planning permission. Therefore, in our submission, there is nothing to prevent Mrs. Thomas opening her modest campsite. If she later wishes to go beyond those 56 days or to change it to a caravan site of more than 5 caravans, as you correctly identified, then that is but another bridge to be crossed, all in good time, for another day and another committee. But let me be clear. The applicant fully understands that there must be compliance with both the planning and the licensing regimes, and one does not trump the other. Compliance with both regimes is exactly what this applicant intends to do. Now, we've been served with several public representations that speak against the application, and these are good people and we respect them. There are a good number, 20 in all. So breaking them down, I can tell you that 20 unanimously worry about noise, especially from outside events. 6 worry about ASB and crime, 6 worry about drink driving, and 13 worry about speed of traffic on the road outside the A417. Right. These representations appear to come predominantly from the Bodnam area, which is 3 miles from our site. Nearest representative on the unredacted, appears to live in Mount Bryan, which is about a mile away, albeit some of the representations have been heavily redacted. So we do not know the precise representatives' details. Several of them talk about a noisy party at Chase Distillery some time ago, maybe after a year before, I'm not sure. Firstly, Chase lies about 1.5 miles from our site as the crow flies. Okay, it's further if you drive it. And secondly, that party at Chase has got nothing to do with our applicant and her application, and is therefore, with respect, irrelevant. But I will address each concern in detail and in order. Noise. We are not insensible to the unanimous concerns about noisy outdoor music events, and have therefore withdrawn our request for any live music outdoors completely. Now that has addressed that concern in its entirety. What remains is indoor music in a small clubhouse, and we've offered the Herefordshire model conditions, the standard ones around noise and vibration, not causing a nuisance to anybody, and also turning the volume down in the event that any music becomes audible from outside the curtilage site, that's causing a public nuisance. Now, if you require a further condition about doors and windows being closed, then we will of course accede to your determination. Now, please look at the plan in front of you. The EHO have already referred to a small clubhouse that seats only 26 people. Perhaps you could get another 24 in there standing. We're talking about 50 persons maximum capacity, and we haven't factored in any musicians, their instruments, or their PA system in there yet. Frankly, this clubhouse would not be big enough to host this licensing subcommittee meeting if everybody turned up that made representations. Yet there seems to be some concern about a massive, throbbing, late-night entertainment venue opening in this rural location. Please do not ignore the evidence of your own eyes. This is not our intention, and that prospect in those premises is simply impossible to achieve in reality. However, having heard that we are what we're talking about here, and there's no doubt, it's no doubt about it, is a big issue for local residents, then we will withdraw our request for live and recorded music indoors as well, and we'll fall back upon the provisions of the Live Music Act 2015 as amended by the same named Act 2015.
Sorry, apologies to interrupt you, Mr. Semper. Chair, we've lost our clerk of the committee. Can we just stop briefly whether we can see whether we can get her back into the meeting, please?
Yes, I apologize, Mr. Semper. We'll try and
no worries.
Get Caroline back in. You go on, Jen.
Chair, Caroline's just dropped out. I would guess the internet's gone. I will send her a message. Do we need to adjourn, Alice, or should we just hold for a minute or two?
Can we hold for a minute or two, only because we have slight timing issues this morning. So if we can possibly get her back in the next couple of minutes.
I have her personal telephone number. I will contact her.
Chair, I think we are going to have to adjourn for 10 minutes because she's clearly fallen off the system.
We've fallen out, haven't we? Jen, can I ask that the live stream be stopped? Welcome back, everybody. Apologies for that interruption. We lost our clerk through an internet glitch. We stopped as Mr. Semper was in full flow, explaining the situation of the applicant in this application. So, Mr. Semper, if you could remember where you'd got to, the floor is yours again.
Yes, indeed. Stand by. Let me do that. Thank you. Oh, there we are. Okay, now look, having heard what these good people are talking about here today, it is clearly a big issue for the local residents. Consequently, we now withdraw our request for live and recorded music indoors as well, and will fall back upon the provisions of the Live Music Act if we were to ever offer any musical entertainment. With that, members of the panel, any issues about live and recorded music, indoors and outdoors, are simply lifted in a single stroke from your deliberations here today. Right, glad we discharged that one, albeit we had a 10-minute break. Next thing is raised is ASB. Now, as this is a site for guests, we are unsure how ASB is going to spill outside of our grounds. This bar area is not open for anyone other than guests. It's not a pub. And furthermore, there is no history of any ASB issues associated with the premises. This is pure speculation, which of course is excluded from your considerations under the dictum of the famous Thwaites case, which I quoted in our last hearing. Drink driving. Again, this is a site for guests. We are not attracting speculative and fleeting visits from passing motorists. In any event, were you to be actuated by this concern, it would effectively mean that no pub with a car park could open in Herefordshire, or supermarket with a car park or a garage could ever be licensed. So people come to the site by car, surely, and they stay on site. I'm not really sure that this concern is relevant. And lastly, we've got the speed of the traffic on that A417 road outside. Definitely a concern for the Planning Commission, definitely would be a concern for the Planning Committee and Highways Departments if and when an application is submitted to the Planning Authority for a touring caravan park. But we are not discussing in this forum today. And incidentally, we served on the committee the RTC data for the 417 to about 3 miles each side in applicants' premises, available on the collision map website. And this reveals that there have been no recordable or reported RTCs on this stretch of road since the 31st of December 2016. But that is by the by, because the public safety licensing objective does not extend to highways management in the roads outside, and is simply confined to people physically using the premises on site. And you'll find that reference statutory guidance para 2.7. So we've also received a representation from Environmental Health, who have urged you to dismiss this application out of hands for the reasons given. We were a little disappointed and confused by this representation, as Mr. Needs, my business partner, has been trying to engage with the Environmental Health Department since the 9th of March, that's even prior to the submission of this application, in order that we could discuss this application with the offer of a site visit, so that we can all work together in partnership, addressing any legitimate concerns. However, that willingness to liaise has not been reciprocated. Mr. Needs has retained a copy of all his emailed attempts to liaise with the EHO, but the first contact we've heard from him was on the 7th of April, which is, I think, is the day before the end of the consultation period, in the form of an email and a representation urging dismissal of the application. I believe Mr. Needs intends to escalate his concerns to line management at a later date. However, upon receiving the EHO representation, we immediately withdrew our request for any outside music provision on this premises license, which I believe addresses the concerns of noisy festivals, etc. The day we have withdrawn our request for the inclusion of live and recorded music from this premises license, so that really should be the end of the matter. So there we have it. The EHO seem to be complaining about noise emanating from a clubhouse that they have never inspected, despite being invited to do so. And we have now tactically withdrawn our request for any form of live or recorded music within this application. In the event of other noise issues, we have offered the model conditions that prohibit noise emanating from it, so as to cause a nuisance, and the provision of any such noise to be rectified immediately should that noise become a nuisance to anyone at any undisclosed time at any point in the future. Now, if you want the doors and windows closed, for example, except for ingress and egress after 2100 hours, then we will willingly accept that condition, Chair. So in conclusion, this is a very modest application for a little campsite in Ellingswood, wherein the applicant wishes to retail modest quantities of alcohol to resident campers, both by way of on and off sales from her clubhouse. To meet that, all the other responsible authorities have examined this application with the exception of the EHO, and all have raised no representation, which indicates that the operating schedule and concomitant conditions do indeed promote the licensing objectives and raise no concerns about them being undermined in the slightest. You'll note the absence of the police here today to argue against the application. They have a statutory responsibility to object to this licence if it were not capable of promoting the prevention of crime licensing objectives. So these speculative crime, ASB and drink driving worries do not concern the police. Likewise, neither Children's Services nor trading standards have raised concerns. It is their statutory duty to ensure that all licensing applications do indeed promote the protection of children from harm. Yet they do not share any of the concerns mentioned in some of the representations from members of the public about children being put in some form of harm. Now, if we can hear today whether any specific EHO concerns remain following our wholesale removal of the request for live and recorded music across the site, then we can hopefully resolve whatever it is that worries them. My client would respectively like to obtain a premises licence for her modest campsite at the panel's earliest convenience, and therefore I respectfully exhort you to grant it the revised terms that we've applied for. Now, from the representations that were brought up, EHO have shown you an aerial map, and that's all very good. But from our area, knowledge of the area, several of these yellow circles are not actually residential at all. They are sheds or light industrial units, okay, and also the red lines on it do not reflect the licensable area anymore. Now, we've been accused, for one of the accused is a strong word, it has been suggested that the details have been unclear, okay. Well, so the lack clarity, well, that's obvious, and I'll tell you for why. Because planning permission hasn't been granted, the numbers of people attending this site and the means in which they attended are not yet known. The business plans will be forthcoming once that planning process has been undertaken. This application is merely the starting point, and when it was filed on the 9th of March, and we were given the statute requires us to consult for 28 days. Sorry, I'm awfully sorry. The application was placed on the 12th of March, yeah. But like I say, we've been in contact with EHO since the 9th, okay. The purpose of the consultation period is to negotiate these issues, to discuss, explore them, and remedy them before there's ever any need for a hearing. But simply, our requests for meetings and discussions have received no response between the 9th of March and the 7th of April. Okay, Mr. Smith, Dr. Smith, excellent. He's mentioned these adverts in the Oldham Times. I've got to be honest with you, I have absolutely no idea the workings of local newspapers, why that should inadvertently be published up there. It has been correctly advertised and published in the Hereford Times, which all needs to be done. So with respect, that's not particularly pertinent. The other pertinent issue he raised was the applicant is in training. So the applicant does not possess a personal license. Right, now the Licence Act is very clear on this. To apply for a premises licence, which is what you're hearing today, the applicant needs to fulfil two criteria. First, they've got to be over 18, and secondly, they have to intend to carry on a business that involves the sale or supply of alcohol by retail. She does not need to have a personal licence to apply. Okay, it may interest you to know that she is actually in training with our company right now, and I have every confidence that she will pass. Okay, so that's basically where we are. This is a modest application for a small clubhouse on a yet to be completed campsite. For whatever reason, perhaps a noisy party in the past at Chase Distillery, members of the public have erroneously believed that such an occurrence will become a 7-night-a-week feature of life in Arlington. Far be from the applicant any such intention. However, we're not insensible to these public concerns, be they well-founded or well-grounded or otherwise. We intend to run a good business and also be good neighbours. For those reasons, we withdraw any request for any form of life. Local people have raised some concerns, but many of these are predominantly the eventual consideration of Herefordshire Council's Planning Committee, if and when such an application is made, and therefore do not fall within the remit of the Licensing Committee. And I refer you back to the wise words of Ms McAlpine earlier on during this hearing. This hearing is all about whether this application and the conditions attached to it promotes the licensing objectives effectively. It has nothing to do with planning. Okay, and our client would respectfully and simply like to obtain a premises license for this modest campsite at the panel's earliest convenience, and that's about it. be delighted to answer any questions you have on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. We don't allow cross-examination in this.
I was thinking questions from you, the
Yes,
panel.
I understand that, Mr. Semper. Mr. Hardman has his hand raised. Is it something specific on Mr. Semper has said, Mr. Hardman?
No, it was, well, I wanted to thank him because I've never been to one of these, and I've just learned an awful lot from him and everything he said, as I have from all of you. And it was really just by way of a thank you for altering what he's done already in the live music space. But also, I mean, he talks about modest campsite an awful lot. I mean, the only other amendment potentially that I would like to see, as per the form I filled in, was if it is a modest campsite, maybe restricting it for guests only and at restricted times. And that would go a long way to allaying a lot of fears, I think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardman. Emma, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to confirm to the subcommittee that the applicant for this application to be the licence holder is a Diane Elizabeth Thomas. She is also named as the DPS, which is the Designated Premises Supervisor. To be one of those, you have to hold a personal licence, and to date, she has not got a personal licence with Herefordshire Council, as stated on the DPS form that she was going to be registering with us.
Okay, right. Are there any questions for Mr. Semper from members of the committee? Councillor Andrews P, Councillor Andrews A? No. So I think members of the committee, we will go off to our alternative decision room, and we will return. It is now 13 minutes past 12. We will return at 12:30. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you again for your patience. Can I just go to my fellow committee members to check that they can hear and be heard? Councillor Paul Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can hear and see you clearly.
And are you, Councillor Andrews? Thank you very much. Councillor Polly Andrews.
Yes, Chair, but I can hear and see.
And are you? Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews P. This application has provided us with a lot of discussion. We feel that in order to understand it fully, we need to go and see the site. So there will be a site visit at 10:30 hours on the 7th of May with the 3 committee members and the clerk here today. And then this meeting will reconvene at 14:30 hours on the 18th of May, where we will make the final decision. That is the decision on this application. Thank you for that, everybody. The next item on our agenda has been withdrawn as the representations have now been agreed by all members, and therefore it has come off our agenda. And thank you for your attendance, everybody. Can I now close the live stream?